The boomers are finally stopping mattering. Oh my God, that's just... Half of the boomers, as of January of last year, had already moved into retirement. The snake is finally swallowing that damn watermelon. Now, because they're boomers and it all has to be about them, they're going to roll a couple grenades in the door on their way out. Number one, capital. They were the largest generation, still are, which means they were the largest capital generating generation we've ever had. And as they were approaching retirement but had not yet retired, all that capital was available. A lot of the boom we've seen for the last 15 years is nothing more than the baby boomers shoving huge amounts of savings into the system as they prepare for retirement. Well, half of it has already been converted into T-bills and cash. We've seen capital costs go up by a factor of 3 in the last 4 years. That's not the Fed. That's not the business cycle. That's not Trump. That's not Biden. That is the boomers. And as the rest of them retire, we can look forward to the cost of capital tripling again in the next few years. This will last until another large generation, in this case the millennials, ages into their mid-50s. So we've got two things we're going to get from the millennials. Number one, the older millennials turn 45 this year. We have ahead of us 15 years of the greatest drama in reality television. All the millennials having midlife crises at the same time. Oh my God. But second, when they hit their mid-50s, the cost of capital will finally come down. We just have to wait 10, 12 years. Second, largest generation ever is another way of saying largest workforce ever. Half the boomers have already retired. The new generation coming in, as Oliver pointed out, is the smallest generation ever. The difference between the exiting boomers and the entering zoomers last year was 500,000 shortage just for the year. That number will go up every year for the next 12 before peaking at a shortage for 1 year of roughly 1 million workers. How do we know? They're already here. There's also a qualitative problem. Boomers have their faults, but they're relatively spread out throughout the entire worker cadre, white collar, blue collar, you name it. Zoomers are different. Zoomers are incredibly hardworking, incredibly loyal. They were raised by Xers, so they were raised to know that Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid will not be there for them, and that they can't rely on anyone. And of course, Xers kick them out of the house as soon as they turn 17. They see jobs as a chance of salvation. They will follow you into hell, virtually. They never want to meet you in person. Dream job, coding in a closet at home that locks from the inside. That's going to be a problem moving forward in any number of ways. Comparatively, let's look at where it's at. This is the pay period for a number of Southeast Asian countries that I think are actually do pretty well in a post-globalized environment. They've got healthy demographic structures. Here's our Mexican partners right in the middle, hyper-competitive. And here are the Chinese. Labor costs in China are up by a factor of 15 since the year 2000, but the productivity of the Chinese worker hasn't even tripled. They are no longer the low-cost producer. And they never became skilled enough to become the high-cost producer. There is not a manufacturing subsector on the planet today where the Chinese are the obvious choice from a price point of view. Everyone who has tried to reshore, deshore, offshore, friendshore, whatever word you want to use for what's going on right now, has discovered that after the process is paid for, they have a simpler supply chain system with fewer steps, higher quality, and lower cost. So why do we still talk about China as an industrial power? Sunk cost of the industrial plant. That's $35 trillion. You do not move away from that in a short period of time, and you certainly don't do it for free. But we are now on the clock, and we can see the end of the Chinese system from where we are. And anyone who front loads is going to discover something a lot different from the people who don't. Because you can either front load and build out your capacity in an environment of constrained capital and labor, or you can wait till all the laggards try to do it at the same time and there's no product. So, no pressure. Let's talk capital. This is the private credit curve for the United States. This is all sources of private capital to all destinations, everything except the interbank window. Okay, from 2000, at the beginning of this chart on the left, to that bump in the middle, that's the subprime build. We doubled total private credit in 7.5 years. As a result, we got some bubbles, we had the subprime crash, and we had a recession that knocked 5% off of headline GDP. This is our baseline. 7.5 years, doubling of credit, 5% correction. Everybody remember that process? Everyone remember what that was like? Okay? Same data, different scale. Here are our Canadian neighbors. Do we have any Canadians here today? Wow, you guys should be in charge of border security. Oh, they're up there. Okay. I would argue that from 2000 to 2007, the Canadians had the best banking sector in the world. Best run, lowest risk. They had done none of the things that we had done. They didn't have a subprime sector. They didn't have this thing called asset-backed securities. But after the financial crisis and the Great Recession, they had a very Canadian response to what happened down here. They're like, Americans just had the greatest recession ever. We can totally have a greater recession. And they disassembled every safety system across their entire sector. They did everything that we did wrong, but with more effort. They got to about 2013, 2014, like, whoa, 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 whoa. Maybe we don't want to win this one. And they dialed it back. They're not out of the woods, but I do feel better about Canadian finance and banking today than I have in the last 10 years, and I get my good news where I can these days. All right, Germany. If you want to buy a home in Germany, you do not get your 20% deposit down and go to finance the other 80% at the bank. No. You go to the bank, you declare your intentions, right? Great. Today, write us a check for what you anticipate your monthly payment being, and then come back in a month and do it again, and again, and again. Do that 60 times. And once you have proven that you are not a credit risk because you now have a 5-year track record with us, then you can apply for a mortgage. The German system faces several systemic issues, many of which I think will kill the system. Credit overextension is not on the list. That's more of a Greek thing. 7-fold increase of credit in 7 years, we know that story. As of COVID, their GDP had already collapsed by 55%, and of course, COVID screwed up the data for everybody. Here's Australia. I love the Australians. They're like us, but with character. Now, Australia and the United States have very similar governing philosophies. Most decisions are made at the state and the local level, and the only things they put at the top are things that really there's no substitute for very concentrated authority, and finance falls into that category. So I'll give you an example of how we did it versus how they did it. During subprime, at the very peak of the crisis, Sheila Bair of the FDIC and Paulson at Treasury and Bernanke at the Fed crowded around a two-top at a bar in DC, and in less than an hour worked out the details for what we would soon know as TARP, the restitution program that helped bail people out and put a floor to the crisis and set the stage for recovery. Had a very, very American characteristic to it. If you had done something dumb as a lender or a lendee, you were on the hook for some of the loss. The money wasn't free. The Australians did a similar program on a similar time frame with one big difference. It didn't have that last little catch. They just guaranteed everyone's mortgages. Furthermore, if you could prove that you could make your monthly payment with a 100% government guarantee, you automatically qualified for a second mortgage. And a third. And a fourth. The Australians have not yet begun their correction. And when they do, you do not want to be down under. India, same basic program as the Australians, but to qualify for the funds, you had to be a personal friend of the Prime Minister. And here are the Chinese. Let me bring that down for you. This is what we're intimidated by? The whole system is a badly run Enron. Now, you'll get growth when there's a bottomless supply of 0% loans that you don't have to pay back. Of course you'll get growth, but it's not healthy and it's not sustainable. And you get some weird stuff. Housing's, of course, one that some people are familiar with. You've all heard what's going on in their system right now. I'll give you an idea of the scale here. Spare housing units in China, unlived-in spare housing units in China, are so numerous that they could put up another 1.5 to 3 billion people. That's more spare housing than the rest of the planet combined by a factor of 5. That stuff's probably worth 10 cents on the dollar, maybe 15. And that's 70% of private savings. That's not even the sector that's most affected. That would be agriculture. So when this goes down, and it will go down, we don't just get a subprime style collapse in every economic subsector at the same time. We also get a political revolution because people have seen their life savings destroyed, and we get famine. There are many, many things about the Chinese system I am concerned about. Their strength isn't on the list.